Hi, I'm Randy DeSoto, and I'm filling in today for Olivia Brown on this edition of WJ Live. Thank you for joining us. Today we'll be looking at three topics: Biden's lying ways, the election deniers that he's calling out regarding 2020 and the Democrats' own issue with that topic, and then finally California's energy woes. But first, to launch us into this topic of Biden's lying ways, we want to look at his recent claim yet again that he was some sort of big-time activist during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And for that, let's take a look at this clip from CNN's Jake Tapper that is from 2019.
He lied to voters, according to the New York Times, quoting aides of Biden's, about having marched in the civil rights movement. This is Biden making this false claim in 1987.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes.
And the New York Times reports, quote, more than once, advisors had gently reminded Mr. Biden of the problem with this formulation. He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement, and more than once, Mr. Biden assured them that he understood and kept telling the story anyway. That is really, really weird.
Yes, it is. And this has been a life pattern of Biden. We have another clip where he's actually debunking his own claim that he marched in the civil rights movement. Let's take a look at that before I kind of give more of Biden's history of embellishing his life story.
During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I, in my own city, worked there, one of the only white employee, as the only white lifeguard in this 13 or 14 lifeguards, to find out that many of these guys lived in that city their whole life, a small city, and never knew a white man. It was a revelation to me.
So Biden was not an activist by his own definition. He was aware. I mean, he was coming of age in the 1960s, went to college and then on to law school. And it's that history of law school. Really, a lot of this stuff about Biden's problems and telling an accurate story of his past came out when he ran for president the first time in 1988. And actually, of course, the election kicked off in 87 as he was running as a primary candidate, but ultimately had to pull out because of these sort of issues that became in the public's awareness. First was that, he went to Syracuse Law School. And while he was there in his first year, it's 3 years to go to law school. I'm a law school grad myself. But he plagiarized pages of a law review article in his own, passing it off as his own paper. Well, he failed the course and he had to take it again. Surprisingly, he wasn't kicked out. They made such a big deal about us, when we got our introduction to law school writing and everything, that if we plagiarized, in any significant way, I mean, that was grounds for expulsion, but he was able to graduate from the law school. And then his most famous instance of plagiarizing happened in 1987 when he was going around giving speeches, to different locations, pitching his candidacy to be the Democrat presidential nominee. And, Robert Kennedy was one of the people he quoted. If you'll notice in the Oval Office, he has a bust of Robert Kennedy behind him. So this is someone that he obviously admires very much. I think Robert Kennedy is an impressive figure in U.S. history, too, in terms of taking on the mob and other things that he did. But he likes Robert Kennedy, and he also quoted extensively from a labor candidate named Neil Canuck. I mean, going word for word, with Kennedy, where he was saying, the most important thing is not the GDP of the country, it's the poetry. And he just went down the list exactly as Robert Kennedy did. So he's got this penchant for lying. And of course, we don't have to go all the way back then. Remember, multiple times when he launched his presidential campaign this year against Trump, he came back to the old the old lie that Trump had called neo-Nazis and KKK people and others as very fine people regarding the Charlottesville riot. But fact finders have looked into that. And the very next sentence Trump was saying was, I'm not talking about those people. Those people are bad people. He was talking about people on both sides of the argument whether monuments of people like Robert E. Lee should stay up for historical reasons. And so that was a legitimate argument to be had. So he wasn't saying that, clearly was not saying, specifically said that he was not saying that he was in support of, neo-Nazis or any of those kind of people. So, but yet Biden just kept coming back to that lie time and time again. Trump's a racist, and Charlottesville proves it. So this is a habit that he has of not telling the truth. And of course, we saw that penchant towards exaggeration in spades on Thursday night, last week during his Independence Hall address, where he just went time and time again after MAGA Republicans, trying to demonize them, even as he himself had this devil red background going on, which, I don't know, almost conjured up images of the Nuremberg type speeches that Hitler used to make. And I'm not saying that he's Hitler, but I'm saying that it was some of the stagecraft kind of looked like that. And, I noted that during the address, he said MAGA Republicans 13 times, and he said election or election deniers 11 times. And I wrote a Western Journal piece about this, kind of showing how Democrats, if the standard is that election denying makes one an enemy of the state, an underminer of democracy or whatever, the Democrats have been doing this going all the way back to the 2000 election. They did it for Florida. They did it regarding Ohio in 2004, when either of those states, if they'd gone the other way, would have meant that Gore would have won in 2000 and Kerry would have won in 2004. And in fact, members of the party stood up when the Electoral College was being voted, and they objected to those states being counted, which is the same thing that was happening on January 6th. And of course, Trump himself, they were saying that Trump caused this riot or this mob. Well, he said to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. So the RNC put together a clip showing just how duplicitous the Democrats are on this issue. Let's take a look.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. And you can have the election stolen from you.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's
what
real
I'm
thing.
scared about in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate president that didn't really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right.
He's an illegitimate president in my mind.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate? Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
The president-elect, although legally elected, is not legitimate.
I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
And the video goes on, as it says, for 10 minutes showing this. Nancy Pelosi rising up saying that in 2004, when members of her party were getting up during the Electoral College vote, this was democracy in action, that they were objecting to this, and this was the best time to do so. And now, Biden's own press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, was guilty of this very thing of being an election denier. That's undermining democracy, apparently, according to Biden. In 2016, she tweeted this tweet showing in which she said, stolen elections, stolen drone, welcome to the world of unprecedented Trump. And she did the same thing. She had similar tweets regarding Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, saying that he was not the rightful winner of the 2018 governor's race that Stacey Abrams was. So Peter Doocy did a good job calling her out on this, saying, well, watch what he says right here.
You tweeted in 2016 Trump stole an election.
I was waiting, Peter, when you were going to ask me that question.
Well, great. Here we go. You tweeted Trump stole an election. You tweeted Brian Kemp stole an election. If denying election results is extreme now, why
so let's be really clear. That comparison that you made is just ridiculous. I have been well, you're asking me a question. Yes. Let me answer it.
And you said it was ridiculous.
I was talking specifically at that time of what was happening with voting rights and what was in danger of voting rights. That's what I was speaking to at the time. And here's the thing. I have said Governor Kemp won the election in Georgia. I've been clear about that. I have said President Trump won the election of 2016, and I've been clear about that. What we are talking about right now is let's not forget what happened on January 6, 2021, when we saw an insurrection, a mob that was incited by the person who occupied this campus, this facility at that time. And it was an attack on our democracy. Let's not forget, people died that day. Law enforcement were attacked that day. That was the danger that we were seeing at the time. That's what the president has called out, and that's what he's going to continue to call out. So yes, when you have MAGA Republicans, a extreme part of Republicans who just deny or do not want to really say what exactly happened on that day, or say it was a protest when it clearly was not a peaceful protest. That's not what we saw on that day. Yes, the president's going to call that out. And here's the thing, majority of Americans agree with him. Majority of Americans agree with this president on protecting our democracy, protecting our freedom, and protecting our rights. That's what we're talking about today, and that's what the president's going to focus on.
Well, I think it's convenient that she now agrees that Trump and Kemp are the winners, when, of course, Trump's now out of office and Kemp's about to run for re-election. But so it's no longer an issue. And, of course, she's working for her boss, who's saying that if you deny elections, you're undermining democracy. So all of a sudden she's had a come to Jesus moment, or whatever you want to call it. And she's, saying that these people are now the legitimate winners. So, and then as far as, I do have to speak briefly when she said that, people died that day. Well, the only people that died that day were protesters. And the only shot that was fired that day was shot by a Capitol police officer when he killed Ashley Babbitt. So this, quote, insurrection, it was wrong. There should not have been violence. But of the hundreds of thousands of people who were there that day, some hundreds have been charged with resisting arrest or assault or those sort of things. So these people did some wrong things. But I would hazard to say that if the shoe were on the other foot and the Democrats were protesting a second term of Donald Trump at the Capitol or during the Electoral College vote, they would have characterized it as a mostly peaceful protest. But in any case, on to the last subject, which is, California's energy woes. Gavin Newsom has been on the television recently encouraging people not to use too much power because California is seeing 100-degree plus weather, as we have here in Arizona too. This last week or so has been hot out in Arizona, warmer than it's been most of the summer. But we're not having rolling blackouts or having the governor come on television and say that we need to stop using appliances or probably stop plugging in electric vehicles. And so let's take a look at Gavin Newsom's plea to change their electric ways over these next few days.
California and many other western states are experiencing simply unprecedented temperatures. In fact, this heat wave is on track to be both the hottest and the longest on record for the state and many parts of the West for the month of September. Californians, you've stepped up to help in a big way to keep the lights on so far, but we're heading to the worst part of this heat wave, and the risk for outages is real and it's immediate. These triple-digit temperatures throughout much of our state are leading, not surprisingly, to record demand on the energy grid. Everyone has to do their part to help step up for just a few more days. Individuals, the state, industries, business, all doing their part to help reduce strain on the grid. Now, here's specifically what you can do. In the early morning hours, particularly tomorrow and the next day or so, pre-cool your home. Run your air conditioning earlier in the day when more power is available. And we encourage you to close your windows and blinds to keep your home cool as well. And today and tomorrow afternoon after 4 p.m., in particular 4 p.m., please turn your thermostat up to 78 degrees or higher and avoid, to the extent possible, using any really large appliances. You can visit flexalert.org to learn more about what you can do. Californians, you've rallied before, and we can do it again. Keep it up.
I lived in California during the 2000s, and we never had these sort of, as I recall, we never had these sort of brownouts or rolling blackouts or anything like that to preserve energy. And, Schwarzenegger was governor at the time. I'm sure that maybe he did some green initiatives. I don't recall any big time ones, but what came after that, of course, is Jerry Brown and now Gavin Newsom. And they've been on this big green energy kick. And what seems to be playing out is they have undermined the security of the electric grid in California. And, I noticed in another clip, and I want to show you this, of Gavin Newsom kind of chastising Texas for using too much coal in helping produce their electricity. Of course, Texas is the number one use of wind turbines to get electricity, and they use solar. And as we do here in Arizona, we have a large solar component to our electric grid. But here is Newsom chastising Texas.
And I encourage those that are out there as critics of California's energy policies, particularly those that are fully owned subsidiaries of oil interests and big energy interests in the fossil sector, to consider the following. Just one example. And I don't mean this to demean, because I recognize intimately the stresses that many other jurisdictions are facing as it relates to extreme heat and extreme drought. I'm deeply empathetic to the challenges they face. But put in perspective, year to date, in the state of Texas, year to date, they have consumed some 22.9 million tons of coal, polluting the planet, making conditions worse, impacting climate, exacerbating the very conditions they're trying to mitigate in terms of their energy reliability, versus California, that has consumed just 18,000, 22.9 million tons versus California's 18,000.
Of course, Texas is the second most populous state. And before Newsom gets on his high horse talking about renewables and how California's cutting edge, a lot of their energy they import because they can't generate enough electricity to provide for their whole population. And a lot of those imports come from here in Arizona and up in Utah. Well, Arizona uses coal. It's not the main source. The largest source is natural gas, but 13% of our electricity is generated by coal. And in Utah, which is another major source for California, 61% is. So, you can say that you're not using that much coal yourself in California, but if you're drawing it from nearby states who do, well, that's still coal use. So, and the most important thing, of course, is to have a reliable electric grid, and technology continues developing to keep, to scrub the towers so that particulates don't get out from coal and that sort of thing. So there's things we can do, but for the foreseeable future, renewable energy will be a part, but not the total, supply of our energy. So we keep growing in this area, but we need reliable energy first and foremost. So here in Arizona, we're experiencing the same heats and more, but we're not having the blackouts. And in California, they're keep warning that they are, and of course they have, in recent history. So enough of the sanctimony, I guess, and that's what kind of ties all these stories together. The sanctimony on part of the Democrats of, Biden talking about being the civil rights, big time player, or MAGA Republicans being the only people that have had questions to elections when Democrats have been doing it for years. And of course, now this energy issue. So I guess the message that we can draw from all of this is that we need to knock them off their high horse in November. We need the Republicans to retake power in a further level at the state level, and of course at the federal level, to put a check on the Biden administration and him really wanting to take the country in the direction of California in terms of its energy policy, and we cannot afford that. So thank you very much for watching WJ Live, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.